didn't kill him. He killed himself. He was dead when I got here. Elantris by Brandon Sanderson is a 600-ish page novel, the first of published novel and the first Cosmere novel published in 2005, about 20, it just has 20-year anniversary. Okay, so I have some very divided feelings about this book. It's a love-hate relationship for me, so I'm gonna skip my normal traditional newspaper bullet point clipping town crier style nutshell review for an indulgent convoluted review, because this is an indulgent convoluted book, so I think it fair. So first thing I want to say is, like the good things about it. It's just some slight fantastical qualities, timeless, eternally inspiring themes like how just faith in general, and particularly how religious theologies motivate society and build societies and shape societies. And so that's right there is interesting. Likable characters, but not the most human and realistic. By the end, it takes a while to actually really care about them. The world building and the magic systems are really the star. Why I think this book is famous, why people who like it as much as they do. It's because it's so different and original, and the style by which it tells the story is different as well. So basically, you have this capital city that's also its own little nation called Elantris of magic users with this unique magic system, which has its root in something like a universal consciousness from another dimension, or something called Aeon Door, and then it connects to all these other kingdoms. But there was some sort of earthquake or a magical anomaly that severed the central operating system, which gave these rulers, which were also these powerful magic users, their power, and severed them from this other dimension. And so it made this weird effect where the life force of the city and the inhabitants itself are suffering from this sort of magic disease, if you will. Like this, their bodies can't die, but they can't heal either. So it's in this state of decay. And so basically, the story intentionally starts itself in the middle of a complex world with a lot of different complex theologies and politics, and they're interconnected with how the magic systems work, and how they have things like teleportation and healing and all these things. But it doesn't really, it's weird because I hated the pacing of the story, and I hated the delivery and the execution, because the world is full of mysteries and it's intriguing and it pulls you along well, and there's some classiness in the themes and the characters, and especially the theme of making something out of nothing, giving a why or a purpose, which is very ennobling and inspiring in what seems like a doomed situation, which is kind of a meta allegory of the pains that are common to mortal life, so to say. And so the power of belief and faith is connected to purpose, and there's also themes of leadership there, which is just very classy and typical of Sanderson, filled with heroism and hope. And then as characters slowly try reconnect with the door, and the main character Rowden gradually has to basically relearn how this magic system works. You find some this is very infrequent, but when they do happen, really visually, imaginatively provocative action scenes involving the magic, or just cool ideas, basically. But to me, it just altogether, this is a case of, I think, ambition, substance overcoming style. And I have a theory, and it's basically too much information at once, too much tell, not enough show. And that seemed kind of lame to me, and so it was just a lot of bad plotting, pacing, and writing decisions. But the world building and the magic systems and the characters are pretty much 10 out of 10. And the characters also complex, have different very complex backstories with realistic desires. So three-dimensional characters, but all of the storytelling itself is the lack of style, the lack of artful delivery, and just bad decisions in the way. It really just is an extremely frustrating read, because there's so many different elements it feels like you're reading an encyclopedia from an alien world that is so out there. It's like something from Final Fantasy, something just so outside of Earth, anything close that I can really relate to, that's told in a way that's so non-conventional, or it's just doing too much work. The reader's doing too much work, and it's not a fun thing to escape into because you don't see an application of these individual elements and that in use so that they mean something to you. And then when they all come together and interplay into each other, like with Sarene's um, character arc plot line of trying to make compromises between all these squabbling nobles competing for power, and with the fall of Elantris and all the court what's it called, espionage and trickery and gaslighting. It's like that would be more interesting if it was executed in a fashion where we actually understood all these different elements better and saw them played out. And to do that, typically I think in narratives you have to have an emotional component where you see how this stuff affects people, and Sanderson tries that, but not in a way that really brings it home. And he also weirdly enough, unlike other of his books, which are like masterpieces, it doesn't use like very descriptive or stylistic prose to really understand all of what's going on. It kind of just expects you to envision a lot and off of very little description when these elements are introduced in how they play off each other all at once, which just makes everything so confusing because it's intriguing and pulling your mind in one direction while bombarding you with encyclopedic info dumps at the other time that I just didn't care about enough to find. So it's putting me to sleep all at once. And I found that just to be one of the most, I hate to say this as much as I love Sanderson, one of the most frustrating like reads I've read in a long time. Just it was not a fun or joyful experience because I felt, oh, I don't think I'm stupid or anything. I just think I prioritize a balance between style and substance, and this felt like the world building was too big for its own good, too ambitious for its own good, and I was just, the style wasn't there. There wasn't artful or thoughtful like plotting and delivery for me to really get into it and care enough to keep up with what I'm being overloaded by, which is information. And so it's hard to visualize or make sense of what's going on. In fact, I'm embarrassed to admit I had to read this twice to actually like understand. And halfway through the second reading, I was tempted to start completely over because I felt like I missed things. I ultimately just decided to power on through and finish it. And so it was just like you don't want to make a book a chore to read. So the execution, the delivery, the artfulness, the prose, the visual details, all that stuff, and the pacing matters. Now, some people who have different priorities when they read fiction might just love this book. Maybe they don't care about any of that stuff I mentioned. Maybe they're just there because they like the challenge and they like to like for them reading fantasy that has sort of a science fiction type amount of world building and details and plotting and magic systems and how it affects the world. Maybe the fun for them is putting all the pieces together like a jigsaw puzzle. But this story, you understand, this complex world after the heart and soul of the world has been killed, essentially, and you're discovering everything retroactively. And I think to the author that might seem really clever, and I'm sure he knows exactly how all those things work and how everything goes on. But it's hard to keep up with, and it's hard to follow, and it's hard to be fun when you're doing so much mental work. I mean, some people find that process rewarding, but when I read fantasy, I typically don't. I expect that more with like hard sci-fi or something. So this feels like it has many styles of a hard sci-fi novel mixed with fantasy, and so I would say experienced fantasy or sci-fi readers will love this, and it's very classy too, and has a lot of good qualities like world building and all the other things I mentioned, classiness, themes, heroism, all that sort of inspiring stuff that you'll remember for a long time. But overall, it's a terrible place, I think, personally, to start with the Cosmere, and it would probably and turn people off to the Cosmere. And it's an even worse place to start reading fantasy at. So I made that mistake. This was the first Sanderson book I read, and somehow I continued to read his other books, and I'm the biggest fan of the Stormlight Archive and the first Mistborn trilogy, and I think those books are 10 times better than this book. I give this book a 7 out of 10. It's okay, but it has so many. As a hobbyist writer, as an artist, it just bothers me how this all like frustrating on my mind. It's not. It just wasn't an enjoyable read for me. And there's frankly just a lot of lameness. Like I found myself when I finally see magic in action and sort of understand the forces that like work in the allow the world of Elantris to function. Just by the end of it, I just been like, okay, that I don't care, like I care more about story, drama, character development. So for me, The Way of Kings is the masterpiece, so to say. Like The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance and all those books, like the Stormlight Archive. That's the best Sanderson there is, and I think, despite its extreme length, I think it's more accessible to most readers than this book. And so people that claim this is the best Brandon Sanderson book are probably the most pretentious nerds around. And who knows? Maybe they just like challenges, but I did not find this enjoyable. I didn't find it fun. I found it kind of intriguing and inspiring. And here's the thing I do want to say though. For its originality and for all the things it does offer, I have a theory, and that is that Sanderson just wasn't as good of a writer back in this era 20 years ago. And since then, every single one of his books is just better and better. So I have a lot of faith that a sequel to Elantris would be worth my time and my money, and I will definitely check. I'm definitely hyped for a sequel because this feels like kind of how I feel about Assassin's Apprentice versus Royal Assassin in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. The first book was just so awful for like not awful, but just like it was a good story with good characters, but the details and the world, it was establishing everything. It was such a chore to read. It felt like the first act, and then Royal Assassin is where things really get interesting and the story gets really good, and it's like for me it's like 10 times better than that first book. That first book was putting me to sleep, and same with this book. So I honestly think that if he writes a sequel, it will be great. I think if this book was more cutting out the deadwood, or it's not really, that's kind of mean, not really the deadwood, but all the details that don't do anything for what I really care about, the story, the drama, the characters, all that sort of thing, and like explaining things a little better with some more emotional applications of the different religions, for example, in action, and why certain ones are bad, because that wasn't very clear. That wasn't just sort of hinted at, but not really elaborated on. And so this book is it just has imbalanced details and just a lot of weird, bizarre, I don't know, it just didn't land for me like the experience, unlike every other Sanderson book I've read, which basically are all 10 out of 10s, but this one's a solid 7 out of 10, a C minus. And so basically, but I think if this was like, I think maybe it had to be 3 huge books to really come across. And I think if it was better plotted and just better written, I hate to say that, but I think it could be as good as something like Dune. I think it could be a masterpiece. I think it could be like as good as the Stormlight Archive. Honestly, I think there's enough epic, material here that it would have been so much better. So ironically, in an attempt to do substance over style, it sort of warped the balance of stylistic elements that could have been used to tell the story that would have been more powerful. But so many things feel rushed. It makes the author feel transparent at times. It feels like something that's trying to wow you with so much stuff that ultimately it's not have an artful delivery, and so it takes me out of the experience somewhat. Not all the time, but so I don't think this was worth my time or my money. But now that I've read it, the irony is that I would definitely read a sequel because I'm invested enough. It feels like this. Uh, uh, it stands on its own just fine as a story, but I mean, you got to have a world of patience and a huge imagination and a lot of mental processing power to actually enjoy this. People that claim that they do, I am very suspicious that they're just trying to be a hipster about it and say they like something that's challenging, because I found it to be a bore and very challenging most of the time. So anyway, I had other thoughts, but I can't remember them. So that's unfortunately my honest opinion of Elantris, my lowest. I think this is Brandon Sanderson's worst book, but even it's funny because even his worst book is still all right. It's still okay. It's still a solid story. It just has problems that just had me pulling out my hair, so to say. So, but I do think Brandon Sanderson is the greatest living fantasy author right now, just for reason of like sheer quality, originality, all these other things that take familiar elements in fantasy and make them new, add something original, and very commercially not very commercially accessible, but it has that sort of sense of joy. Reading most of his books, this one sort of, but not as much as like the Stormlight Archive or the Mistborn series. They all sort of they don't let you off easy. There's an established world, and you will have to stretch your intellect somewhat to really get the payoff, both the mental visuals and the emotional payoff, and really understand all of what's going on. And it sort of converts you to that over time. It's almost a spiritual. I've said this before. It's almost a spiritual experience to read Sanderson, because it's just incredible how real aspects of this fictional magic systems function in these fictional worlds and universes and interdimensional stuff, and how somehow you can sort of feel or have a sort of mini sort of vision in your mind of how it could sort of, it almost feels feasible in a way that defies words, the link between energy of soul and feelings and intuition with naturally occurring forms of energy. And it makes you think, and the juxtaposition between that and real functions of energy in real life are forever seen differently. And that's something that is probably the most powerful fantasy literature I've read in my life. Not so much with just human drama, but in terms of the complete cinematic experience that is the adventure, like adventures into the unknown, that is the anomaly that is Brandon Sanderson, which is some sort of mad scientist. So I really do think the man's a genius, and I think he's got great books. But this book was hella frustrating for me, and I got to be honest about that. But in any case, I'd recommend it to longtime fantasy fans and fans of this Cosmere universe only. Cosmere purists. I don't think it's a good place to start with his books or fantasy. But anyway, those are my thoughts. 7 out of 10. Please send me your recommendations. I'll read anything original. I'm reading like 50 books at the same time right now of all different genres. I'm reading beatnik, road adventure fiction, talk, opera, slice of life novels, dramas, noir, crime, horror, fantasy, all types of fantasy, grimdark, epic, high fantasy, heroic fantasy, everything. I read. I can't settle down on one thing. I read so many different books at the same time, and then I never finish these books. I read them all at the same time, and then I have waves where I finish like 10 at near the same time, and that's how I like to do it. So, anything that's original, anything that's of high quality or interesting, I'm open-minded to try out. So, and by the way, right, it's funny I say that as if I have an audience. I don't, not yet anyway, but maybe in the future. So, I mean, if you're seeing this video a long time in the future, go for it, because I plan on having this channel for a long time. Well, we'll see. But it's really my intention with my channel is really to have a sort of just like a database, like a library of more reviews out there for people, different opinions, because I do think most of the books that I find and discover or rediscover that have small followings are becoming forgotten by history. In time will be rediscovered, maybe, probably, I hope, and more insights might help people get a grasp of how universal cultural value systems morph and change over time, because that's how I feel when I look up reviews of the time of which older fiction that I like came out, and then I juxtapose and compare that with present reviews, and it's extremely fast, very useful process. And so it's my way of paying it forward as as crazy, as much of a shot in the dark as my channel is. Like, I think it could be beneficial to somebody out there someday. So who knows? Right now, it's also sort of just fun, just to experiment. So I don't know if this video will ever get any views, but it might just be me screaming into the void. But that's just a little note on my channel. So anyway, but yeah. So hit me up with recommendations. Thank you. Peace.